Here we go.
Boom. I'm ready. Hey, I'm Teddy Burriss. I'm a LinkedIn strategist and coach. I work for a company called Burriss Consulting, but I show up every Wednesday to hang out with my buddy Randy Wooden. And it's not a probation officer doesn't require me to do it, but I do it anyway because it's a lot of fun.
Don't let him kid you. He works for his wife. It's just so you know, that's the real story behind the scenes. But
and the door is open, so she can hear you reminding me that.
Good. That's good to know. Randy Wooden, I work with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina. We help job hunters across the spectrum from youth to mid-career professionals, those that want to develop other skills or trade skills to help further their career. But my program is the Professional Center, and our clientele are very much like the ones on the call here today. Again, industry, job function may differ, but the common denominator is that they're in a job search and typically would have a degree or maybe been in a leadership role, salaried role, that kind of a thing. And whether you're employed and kind of putting your toe in the water, or maybe you've lost your job due to COVID and need to find something else, we're here to help. We're free, which is a nice thing. And find me on LinkedIn or send a message here or reach out to me and we'll respond to you. And again, the help is free. We're happy to help you. And one of the things that we do to help job hunters is this show that we do every Wednesday. And we bring in special guests to talk about topics related to job hunting, but it also extends beyond that. And it extends to our professional lives and also personal lives and how we can play better with others and how we can plan better for our future. So today is no exception. Gary Foster joins us all the way from Denver, Colorado, where he's getting a little snow. And I know, Teddy, you want to jump in? Housekeeping. Before we get too deep in this, take care of that, my friend.
Yeah, housekeeping.
Yep.
Look, make sure you get rid of all the distractions. If you brought your girlfriend in the room with you, ask her to go do something else. If you brought your boyfriend, ask him to go do something else. I want you to focus on this conversation with Gary Foster. Additionally, you need to tell us where you're located. If we don't know where you're located, we can't tease you. So tell us what city and state or country you're in. That's imperative. Lastly, if you have any questions that you want to throw at Gary during the conversation, which I guarantee you it's going to be relevant to every single one of you, then drop your questions in chat and I'll bring it up with Gary. Back to you, Randy.
We want to see where you're watching us from. So we've got Greensboro and Charlotte covered, but I'm sure Gary's brought along a contingent from Colorado and points west out there. I've got some friends out around Denver, and I tell you, it becomes a lifestyle for the folks. The whole mountain, the ski, the whole climate, almost a different culture in many ways as to other parts of the country. But happy to have Gary Foster with us today. And Gary is, among other things, a guitar player, a fly fisher. He's been married 50 years, Teddy. And so he's got you beat by a couple, but he's here to talk about the whole aging issue as we get into redefining retirement. What does that mean today? We'll talk about something called the third age of life. So what is that and why should we care? And I got to tell you, Gary, most of our clients that I deal with are probably older than 40 for the most part. And while they may not be this close to retirement, some mentally are that close to retirement, believe me. But for the most part, most of the job hunter folks that I deal with are staring down that barrel right now that says it's not going to be maybe tomorrow, but it's going to be happening. And so how can we plan for that? We'll cover all of those sorts of topics. But first, Gary, again, thanks for joining us today.
Well, listen, I have been looking forward to this. You guys are having too much fun, I think.
I asked
Actually, we're not, Gary. We're not. We could crank it up a notch.
We fake it. We fake it well. But Gary has, among other things going on, it's a website called makeagingwork.com. So Teddy can put that in there. Makeagingwork.com. So you're a retirement coach, but before we get started into a whole lot of stuff, if you just briefly tell folks kind of a little bit about your background and also the why behind what you do.
Good. Well, the background, let's get that boring stuff out of the way first.
Yeah.
That's good. I guess let me try to condense this down because I've been on the planet longer than most, but I guess I would say that I kind of consider myself an escapee from rural agricultural Wyoming. My grandparents were homesteaders in that part of the country. I grew up in a town of 800. I had 95 in my high school, 12 in my graduating class, played 8-man football. I mean, that kind of puts it into perspective. And, frankly, I'm the first one in my family that was successful in getting a college degree. Now, I will admit, it took me 9 years and 3 different majors to get there, but I got there. And I think a big part of my story is that I really bought the Kool-Aid, which a lot of us still buy into, and I call it the 20-40-20 plan. It's the linear life cycle plan, if you will, of 20 years of education, 40 years of work to try to reach that coveted 20 years of retirement. So I bought into that lock, stock, and barrel, and went to work in the corporate world. I did that for 35 years in various industries, 2 or 3 different industries. Did okay. I mean, I was primarily in sales and marketing. Ended up with 17 years in the telecom industry with a company called MCI. You may remember that name. It became WorldCom and then became bankrupt and then went poof. But that was back in the Enron era. But it was, I guess I never did really adapt too well to the corporate environment. Always had this thing about kind of fierce independence, not really like to give up my time or have somebody control my schedule. So I bailed out of corporate life at 60 and started my own recruiting business, and totally unprepared for what I was launching myself into. But that put me on kind of an interesting journey from the standpoint of breaking away from corporate life, going out on my own and discovering that I wasn't entirely all that well equipped to start my own business. And so I guess an important part of why I do what I do is really kind of what I call a late life discovery of kind of how I'm wired up. It was through the process, and just to go back to the recruiting thing, it sounded like it'd be a good business. I mean, how tough can it be to go out and place a professional that's making $200,000 a year and rake in a $30,000 or $40,000 fee for that, do that 4 or 5 times a year, got a pretty good living. Nobody told me that it was incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Probably the most difficult sales job on the planet. So I wasn't all that good at it, but I didn't like the hunt part of it. But what I did discover I really liked was engaging candidates. I like to engage candidates oftentimes in life issues, career transition issues, and it just seemed to resonate well for me. And I think what it did is it acquainted me with what perhaps kind of one of my inclinations, if you want to call it that, or things that really excited me. So that's been the transition. That's why I've ended up where I am today as a career transition coach. I've expanded my skill set to include resume writing. I'm invading your world, Teddy, and being a LinkedIn profile developer and helping people with their online presence. And I get a big thrill out of work. I primarily work with healthcare professionals because that's the world that I recruited in for 18 years. And so that's my why is, I guess, I just have over time have developed a passion for, I don't know if I want to say a passion, but more of a concern about how we begin to view this post-career life, because a lot of things have changed. And I just felt that there was a lot of wasting going on, if you will. In other words, we tend not to think too hard about what we want to do with that part of our life. And so that's led to, I got certification as a retirement coach. Well, what is a retirement coach? It's certainly kind of a new field. And in the retirement coach world, we're not into financial planning. Don't profess to be financial planners. We certainly encourage people to work with financial planners because that's important. But I think what motivated me to consider that as part of my why was the fact that we know that 2 out of 3 people or couples, if you will, tend to go into their retirement without a non-financial plan. They do a pretty good job of doing the financial planning, but oftentimes just kind of tend to drift into the retirement and find that, it's kind of new territory. There are a lot of hidden things that people don't anticipate that can kind of raise their heads and make that transition into retirement difficult. So that's kind of a condensed version or a condensed explanation of what I've been and why I've ended up where I have. And I'm very passionate about it. I love what I do. I love writing resumes for folks. I love getting inside of their heads and saying, hey, let's find out what makes you unique. What is your brand? How do we differentiate you out there? And,
sure. And we're going to, yeah, good.
That's it.
No, I was just going to say, we're going to try something new today. Teddy has developed a highly scientific poll that he's going to throw out here because we want to get a read from our audience as to how far off from retirement they are. What does it look like to them at this point? And we, to the extent that you want to play along at home, go ahead. There it is. There's the poll. And then we can take some of the answers from that and maybe weave that into our conversation, if that's okay, Gary, because I'm sure you've seen it all. And from, I think I know exactly to, I have no idea. As a matter of fact, a buddy of mine from high school just retired. I think Monday was his last day, or maybe it was Friday of last week. And I saw it on Facebook, and his comment was, now it's time for me to live. That was his comment. Now it's time for, he's given 35, 40 years to one company and he's tired.
Yeah.
And now he said, I want to get my health back. It's time for me to live. And that's just one person. I'm sure you've heard it all. So Teddy, how long do we leave this open?
Well, I'll leave it open for a few minutes. Look here, I
right.
demand 75% participation, and I've only got 70. So I need 3 more people to jump in here and give me their response. Demand. All right, I'm almost there. Come on. Click the freaking button, somebody.
Do I need to click,
vote.
Teddy? Do I get to click? I don't get to click.
No, you and I can't click, man. All right, we just hit 80. So that's a good number. So here, I'll share the results. Look, 36% are 10 years out. So you guys are here. You're right. This is good for you because you got 10 years to really start thinking about it. 12%, 5 years out, and one person is retired right now. I wonder who that is. I'll have to go do some, don't tell me, I'll do some research. But I bet you expect to see this, Gary. 20% said they'll never retire. So,
well, I guess I'm not surprised by that. I would maybe hope that it would be a little higher than that. And I think I'll be able to clarify that position if we get further into this, but that's helpful to know. I'm glad you did that.
Yep. I got another poll. We'll do that in a little bit, Randy.
Yeah. All right. So you've talked about something called the third age when you and I were chatting a couple months ago when we got the idea for the show here. So help us understand, what is the third age of life?
Well, and listen, it's not my term. I mean, it's not new. It's been around a while. And in fact, I did a little research this morning just to kind of get back to the genesis of this. The actual concept, I think, was developed or pushed out by a gentleman by the name of Peter Laslett, and he is a British demographic historian, for what that's worth. And this was in the 90s. He defined actually 4 stages of life. He said the first stage, which is childhood and age of dependence. The second age was adulthood and mid-career. And the third age was that territory between the end of career and the beginning of true old age, where we revert back to total dependence. And the fourth age, obviously, is that age of dependency, ill health. It's kind of the doorstep to the demise. So that's really kind of the genesis of it. And that's really how I define it. I look at it as the end of career, end of parenting, all the way to that true old age. And that's new territory for us. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, that was pretty compact. Maybe it was 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, maybe 10 at the most. But now it's a whole different ballgame, because we've got people, for those of your audience that are in their 40s or 50s, this could be the midpoint, or maybe before the midpoint, because more and more people are living longer and living healthier lives. So that's causing a redefinition, which we'll get into, the redefinition of retirement as well. It's kind of interesting when you look at, there's a guy by the name of Mario Martinez, a neuropsychologist, and he looks at life in terms of portals. And it's interesting to see the evolution of life portals that we've got. And he defines life as having 7 different portals that's evolved over time. We got newborn, infancy, childhood, adolescence, young adult, middle age, and then old age. And that 6th and 7th portal, middle age to old age, that's that 3rd age portal. And as I said, this is new territory. So we're beginning to rethink. We're facing different challenges. We're living longer. We'll transition, I think, from that into how is that impacting retirement. But that's 3rd age. That's the best way I can explain it.
So now, and just as a reminder, if you're watching and you have a question or a comment for Gary, please go ahead and put them in the chat box. The astute and always omnipresent, on the ball, Teddy Burriss will monitor the chat box. So, all right. So now retirement. I think back to my dad, right? My dad was a good bowler, really, really, really good bowler. This is back, he's born in 35, to give you an idea. So you're talking, mid 50s at this point, not age, like the 1950s. And he was a really good bowler. And back then companies had bowling teams and softball teams, baseball teams. And so he was a good bowler, and the local company, a natural gas transmission company, offered him a job cutting grass if he would play on their bowling team.
Remember this.
Yeah, remember that, right? And my dad, Bob, he said, hey, sure. But he learned the business. He learned how things worked. He's very good with his hands and mechanic wise, but that's how he got his job. And he stayed there, his entire career. And now they had him move to Rhode Island, where I grew up. But back then you stayed with a company for a very long time. We don't see that now. We don't see that continuity. But when he retired, they gave him I think they gave him a case of Bud. And I don't know if he got I don't think he got, I don't think they gave him that. I don't remember what it was, but I went to his retirement party and he came home and he sat down and he goes, now what am I going to do? Because he always had a place to go. And now he didn't have a place to go. And it never dawned on me, because I thought retirement's cool. I don't have to get up and go to school. I don't have to get up and go to work. I got, my time is my own. But I remember him saying, he said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I think, wow, my dad's invincible. He knows everything, right? And I'm sure he's not alone. And I'm sure you run into that. What does retirement look like now? How has that been redefined? And Teddy's got a poll, so we want to see, right? Johnny on the spot.
That's right. All right, 75% participation, folks, or you cannot go home. So get on your mouse, get on your touchpad, and
what
let us know.
What does retirement look like to you?
And if I don't have the right answer for you, drop it in chat. If there's a different answer, if you're going to sit at the on top of a mountain, then drop that in chat. What's poll look like to you?
Front porch rocker has not gotten many. Now Gary's play guitar, so he could be a rocker on his front porch, but not in a rocker. But he can't do that now. Yeah. So volunteering looks like that's one of the big ones.
Yeah, come on. I got 60%. Yeah. I need 75. Marty says combination. Debbie's going to travel. Come on. Yeah. I need 3 more people to vote on this poll. Pick your hand up, move it away from the beer, move it away from your sandwich, and click that mouse. Come on. 2 more people.
Hey, order before midnight tonight. We'll throw in
still young, right?
Some Ginzu knives or something. So yeah.
Right.
But we do.
I'm going to close it. So here's what we got.
Yeah.
Volunteering won out. Consulting came in a little bit close. Oh my God, no idea came in pretty hard too there, Gary.
Well, I think that's consistent. That's revealing. 39, 17, and 17. I'm not quick enough to add those all up and come up with a number, but that's the majority of it. So we can speak to that.
Yeah.
So what does it mean now for retirement? How are we redefining retirement?
Yeah, can I share a couple of quick stories that I think would help you understand why I come where I come from? Because I'm not a retirement advocate. Let me be that upfront, and that doesn't win me many friends. But I was influenced, my upbringing, where I grew up, retirement wasn't even a discussion point. I mean, people in rural Wyoming worked till they couldn't. Retirement wasn't discussion. And I had some things happen to me in my 40s, back in the 80s. I kind of got involved in the personal development field. And one of the things that I discovered or observed was that when you looked at some of the most successful people in their various fields, they tended to live longer. And one of the things was primarily because they never left the creative process. Retirement wasn't necessarily a part of their thought process. And then there were a couple of other things that happened along the way. My father-in-law, for example, 45 years with one oil company, got the gold watch, Randy, and the retirement cake. And everybody thought he was in good health, but he dropped dead of a massive heart attack 10 months after his retirement. And I remember him just not, it wasn't the same for him. He lost the structure, as you were referring to with your dad. And then I saw a couple of studies. I mean, IBM did a study. They looked at their pensioners. They found that the average number of pension checks that were written in their old pension plan was 24. Social Security Administration did an analysis in 95, and they determined that the average number of Social Security checks was 29. So what does that say? Well, you know, if we go into full retirement, we seem to be dying younger, I guess, is my whole point. So that's kind of influenced my thinking and led me to really kind of dig into, you know, what's going on here that we need to be aware of. So, and I think right now is the boomers are changing the whole retirement concept. They're driving a lot of this change, but there's several factors that come into play. I think, first of all, we have to perhaps acknowledge that retirement is not a natural concept. It doesn't exist in nature, right? Have you ever seen a retired coyote, for example, or a retired maple tree, right? Dead maybe, but not retired. And then if you just trace the genesis of retirement, it didn't even exist on the planet 150 years ago. It started in Germany in the 1880s. Otto von Bismarck did it for political reasons. Come forward 50 years, FDR did the same thing in 1935, established an arbitrary retirement age of 65 at a time when, you know, the average lifespan was 62. And it was done to move older people out of the workforce so that he could get rioting young men off the streets. So we've carried this forward now for 40 or 50 years. I mean, the financial industry grabbed a hold of it, the retirement or the hospitality industry grabbed a hold of it. And it's now become almost like a pseudo entitlement. Yeah. You know, if I don't retire by 65, I'm a slug. If I retire at 45, I'm a hero.
Yeah.
And I find that irrelevant. I find it doesn't make a lot of sense, because what it does is it puts us on that downward cycle, both mentally and physically, if we completely pursue that, I call it off the cliff retirement, where you jump from vocation to vacation, or from labor to leisure, so, which is what most of us are inclined to do.
So Gary, a couple things came up. One is Don asked a question: what have the turbulent financial times of the past 10 years, how's it forced the redefinition of retirement? You have a thought on that?
Well, I think there's no question about it's impacting it, because your savings are being impacted. I mean, our focus is mostly on the money side of it.
Yeah.
So people are having to rethink, okay, you know, what have I been doing? And I think maybe later on, if we have time, we talk about this analogy that I use, which I think is really kind of cool, is this whole idea of the golf analogy of back nine and front nine.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of people are being impacted. They're having to say, okay, what am I going to do? I know I can't stop working. I've got to do something. How vulnerable am I where I'm at right now? You know, because the whole corporate world is changing too, as we look at the whole global perspective on things. So, you know, corporate life is not the safest place to be anymore.
So here's two other ones. John threw out a great analogy when you were talking about, have we ever seen a retired elm tree? And you're really making me think about that. But anyway, John threw out this: lions, when they're deposed from leadership by a younger lion, apparently tend to die of heart failure within a few months. Interesting. Analogous to us. And here's what Steve Miller threw out. He said this. Steve said, I've heard it's better to retire to something rather than from a career.
I think it's important. I mean, I've had the pleasure of having conversations with people who have done a magnificent job of really anticipating or planning for their retirement. And I'd be glad to share one example if that would be helpful.
Sure.
A retired nurse that I engaged here recently, she actually living in my backyard. And I asked her, I said, yeah, tell me about your retirement plan. She says, well, I have retired, but I'm continuing to help other nurses who are struggling with their transition into profession. And she and her husband, I'll shorten the story. She and her husband, this is the second marriage for both of them, but they have moved around the country a lot. And every place that they moved, they lived, they bought a house. And when they left, they kept that house and turned it into a rental property. Well, they did that with 5 locations. So they had 5 rental houses around the country. They started thinking about this 10 to 15 years before his final retirement, which is still yet to happen. His decision to retire was going to be based on when they make the last mortgage payment on their 6th house. Now, they've been planning this for 10 years. And they know what they want to do. He wants to continue to consult on his own timetable when he retires. She's going to continue to help nurses, but they're balancing a lifestyle. And I love this analogy, and I use this in my teaching. And that is that they are striving and achieving a lifestyle that is a combination of labor, leisure, and learning. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great prescription for that third age as people move into it. Rather going off the cliff, which has some definite downsides, think about how can I combine those 3 things in my life? Now, I may have the resources, I'm going to have the time. How do I balance those? Now, you may move in and out of those at greater velocity at any given time, but that combination of labor, leisure, and learning, I think, is a great prescription for a lifestyle in the third age. So I hope that analogy helps.
Yeah. It does. Hey, Randy, let me do the half break.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So everyone, thank you all 35,000 who showed up today to lunch with Randy and Teddy. Our special guest today is Gary Foster, talking about the third age and talking about this whole dynamic of figuring out what retirement could or should look like for you. So thanks a lot for joining us. Really appreciate it. Randy, back to you.
Yeah, before we got started today, I brought up the term retirement coach, and it was something that I hadn't really heard before. What's a retirement coach? Are you a certified retirement coach? And what does that mean to me if I might be nearing retirement?
Well, yes, I'm certified. Yeah. It's a new field. I think I got certified a couple of years ago. An organization that has developed a certification program, and fundamentally, I guess it's kind of like life coaching, I guess you could say, because really what our focus is to engage folks with this understanding that retirement, you don't want to go into retirement with your eyes closed. You don't want to drift into it. You want to have a semblance of a non-financial plan. And what we try to do is just raise the awareness of the potential pitfalls of a retirement. There's a lot of work has been done by an organization called Age Wave. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Ken Dykewald, but he's done studies on this. They looked at 55,000 baby boomers on this whole issue of retirement. And this was done several years ago, but they determined there's 5 stages of retirement. In the early stage of pre-retirement, 80 to 90% of the people in that pre-retirement phase said they were totally confident that they were going to realize their retirement dreams. And then they hit retirement. And if you talk to those same people 3 to 5 years afterwards, only 40% had reached their retirement goals. So why does that difference exist? Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that They don't go into it with a plan. They don't anticipate or aren't aware of the potential pitfalls. And that's really where a retirement coach can step in and say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about the impact of retirement on your physical health, on your mental health? How are you going to deal with residents? Do you feel like you need a second residence? How are you going to accommodate your extended family? All those sort of, what about your friend list? Your friend list changes when you retire because a lot of your friends are at work. Are you going to let that stagnate or are you going to rebuild it? How do you reconnect? Yeah. So there are a lot of things. And I think it's important that people understand the health ramifications of retirement. And that's probably my most pet area because I'm a health advocate. Feel like I'm kind of a health navigator, if you will. And that kind of falls into that whole retirement coaching thing is to kind of give people some guidance on, you're not 28 anymore. Your body's doing some different things here and you need to be sensitive to that. So what are the things that you should be concerned about? So I like to get into the health thing very heavily with people as I do this coaching. So that bounced around a little bit, but I think that's in essence is steering people into a life that's planned for that third age.
You mentioned about the Western lifestyle and the general state of our health. Are there some tips that you can throw out there regarding, well, first off, what is the Western lifestyle? And I guess then the other would be, what are some tips that perhaps we can kind of work into our lives today so that we don't wake up one day and go, oh, I didn't see that coming.
Well, yeah, you're going to get me wound up here because this is my favorite area. Our Western lifestyle, quite frankly, stinks. Okay. From a health perspective, we don't do too many things right. That just comes from the perspective. What's the number one cause of early death in this country is diet. We eat poorly. We're sedentary. We incur a lot of stress because we're in jobs that are a mismatch with what our uniqueness is. We get frustrated because we're not as well planned for retirement as we know we should be. So we do a lot of things to ourselves, and it shows up, quite frankly, with the fact, let me put it into this perspective. We have a biological benchmark that's been set for us. Some years back, when a lady lived to 122 years and 164 days, Jean Calment in Paris, France. So we know that the body will last that long, but then you dial it back and you say, okay, average lifespan in this country, in the US, is 80 and going backwards. So we got a 42-year gap. Okay, so how do we explain that gap? Well, yeah, genetics comes into play, but it's not the dominant factor. It's a lifestyle that's causing us that gap. Now, I'm not suggesting we all should get to 122. That's a scary thought. But the fact is, there's no reason that any of us should not live to 100 or beyond if we learn how our biology works and how to take care of it. We don't do that well in this country. Consider this fact. We have a food industry that could give a rip about our health. We have a healthcare industry that doesn't care what we eat. You put those two together, what sort of guidance are we getting? Unless we take control of our own health and step out of those two environments, the chances are we're going to stay on that scale where in this country, and this is a frightening fact when you think about it, this is documented, Ken Dykewald documented this in one of his books. He said that in the United States, we have the worst record on the planet of developed countries for the length of period that we are ill in our old age. We average over 10 and a half years of ill health in this country. Most of that related back to lifestyle. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. In our Western culture, we're not alone, but we're the worst. Yeah. Okay, because we choose not to adapt good, healthy habits. And then that brings me back to the golf analogy because, I'm sorry, go ahead, Red.
No, finish up.
Well, I just, to me, the golf analogy is a great one. And I have to give credit to Dan Zeman, who is kind of a pioneer exercise physiologist for this idea. I steal it, but it makes perfect sense. You think of life in terms of the front nine and the back nine. If you're over 40, you're on the back nine. So the question becomes, how well did you play the front nine, from a physiology perspective?
Yeah.
Well, quite honestly, most of us didn't do well, and I'm a poster boy for that.
Yeah.
I've been a gym rat for 40 years, but I had pretty poor diet, and consequences began to manifest themselves in my 70s. So the fact is, I think if we need to begin to raise our awareness of the fact that we don't have a lot of support on how to live a healthy lifestyle. We have to take control of it ourselves.
Yeah.
Much of what we can do to live a long and healthy life is going to be determined by what we do early. If we screwed that up, there's still things we can do in the back nine to get better at feeling right and doing the right things from a health perspective. So
good. I'm with you. The word that comes to mind there is choices. And that's a word that I'm really seriously thinking about. What does that mean in my life? Choices and my extended life as I navigate through the back nine. Hey, Gary, here's a question that Don threw out. So within your pre-retirement strategies, would changing jobs into an area or an industry or a type of role that you'd like to do throughout retirement, would that make sense to do? And I'll give you an analogy. It going through my mind right now at 63, loving what I do. I want to keep doing this as long as I can, or, in this piece of what I do, I'll have to get Randy's permission to do it. But my business, I want to keep doing as long as I do. But in my mind, I'm seriously thinking about going to Lowe's Home Improvement and seeking out a job there because I love that business. And I can see myself every day, for the most part, getting up and going to Lowe's and hanging out in the tool department. What are your thoughts about that shift your career to prepare for your retirement?
Well, this is such a fertile area, and it's very easy for me to grossly oversimplify this idea. But the fact is, and I'm pretty confident in saying this, most people are motivated to get to retirement. They really don't fully enjoy. They're not wired up. They're not motivated and purposeful in what they do in their job. Why are they doing it? Well, they bought into the 20-40-20 plan. They're doing it to make money so they can get to retirement. And it may not be a good match with something that we all have. We are all unrepeatably unique. Okay. There's never been another one like us. There'll never be another one like us. Yeah. And what we tend to do is we tend to suppress that. We tend to cover it over. I mean, you think about what really fired you up at age 9 or 10. You used to torment your parents with it.
Fire trucks.
Well, that's part of your uniqueness, and we tend to barnacle that over, and we get our career, and then we come back and say, "What next?" Yeah. So I guess on that subject, I just encourage people to be thinking about what is it that lights me up.
Yeah.
I mean, if time and money weren't a problem, what would I be doing?
Yeah.
And what does the world need? How can I help people? If I may digress for a second, the Japanese have a concept called ikigai. Ikigai. And it fundamentally, you define the word ikigai, it says a reason to get up in the morning. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing what you're good at and doing what you enjoy most and helping people, and I think that explains you too, okay? That's, I've got a reason to get up every morning because I'm excited about what I do. And I had to wait until my 60s, and I don't encourage anybody to do that. Yeah. But I had to wait until my 60s to kind of rediscover some things that were kind of unique to me. Yeah. I mean, I like to write. I like to be alone. And, how did I end up selling ceiling tile to lumber yards in St. Louis.
Here's another question, Gary, that Doug threw out. How do you plan for your retirement if your wife is still working? And I wonder if he wanted to add to that and she ain't quitting.
Well, it happens all the time. And my easiest answer to that is communicate, communicate, communicate.
So you're saying tell her what to do?
No, you better listen. You better listen to her. There's that classic phrase, I married you for better, for worse, but not for lunch every day. And that's not an uncommon situation where, and think about it, you got, the wife has been home. This has changed over time, but the wife has been home running the household and he's been the provider. Now he comes home and she wants to do something different. I'm tired of this. I would like to start my own career. Well, right there, you've got a schism. And that's one of the things that we do as career coaches, and say, okay, let's talk about this, because the two of you need to communicate. Mm-hmm. You've got to honor each other's positions here. And I think a smart gentleman is going to say, hon, I'm behind you, but let's talk about where we want this to go. If you're going to work, okay, who's going to run the household? How are we going to treat the time with the kids? A lot of things come into play here. But I think, and I go back to that same couple again, start 3 to 5 to 10 years ahead of time. Start talking about this stuff. And like anything else, put it on paper.
Yeah.
But as couples, and I think this is probably one of the most fertile areas for this type of coaching, is when you put a husband and wife together in this conversation, you can make magic happen as far as a plan for the third age.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Gary, I'm going to throw a real world thing at you here. And you've kind of touched on this in differing aspects, I think, throughout the show here. In an ideal world, we'd like to be able to plan for what's next and kind of see that path and such. But many, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but the majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. They're up to their eyeballs in credit debt. They're a paycheck or two away from living on the streets. And they can't afford to retire. They may hate their job. And a lot of what you say is, I get it. I buy it. I love what I do. Teddy loves what he does. We are in the sweet spots. We're in a great flight path. And I could see myself, and I think Teddy could also continue. I know he wants to work at Lowe's, but he could continue there. What do you tell the guy that says, man, I'm up to my eyeballs in debt. My job's so. I work because I got to eat, and I can't ever see myself retiring. I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. Is there any advice or encouragement you can give to somebody? Because there are a lot of folks in that boat.
I guess my first question to someone like that is, why are you concerned about that? I mean, who's telling you that you have to retire? I mean, this is not mandatory. If you're concerned about maybe meeting expectations, then you might want to table that. Fact of the matter is, you're never too late to get started at something. So, and I noticed that one of the questions I had, what advice do you have for someone in their 60s and wants to continue to work, or, maybe is in a career transition? Well, when you think about where we are in our society today, the learning opportunities are tremendous, unprecedented. It's never too late to either tune up a skill or find a new skill or move in a direction that you feel can sustain you for a long period if you choose not to retire or can't retire. I find that a lot of people are up against it because they have been complacent. They've been complacent in their careers. They haven't upgraded their skills. They haven't done anything in the last 5 to 10 years to get current. And then they hit the wall and say, okay, what do I do now? Well, a little bit of catch-up is going to have to take place. Yeah. I encourage, I don't like to talk about job searches anymore. I talk in terms of career marketing campaigns. I mean, you really have to be on top of your career right from the start. And that's going to better position you should something happen, or if you need to transition to something outside of the work that you're doing. So, and again, I'm talking in great generalities. Everybody's situation is unique. But there is unprecedented opportunity to be able to do, and I'm going to come back to that whole thing about doing what you're good at, what you love doing, and which can have impact on other people, to me is a great guideline to be pursuing as you go into this third age of life.
Any tips? Yeah. Any tips on that self-discovery for somebody who says, yeah, I'm buried in a job I really don't like. And you talk about upskilling and are there resources, or what steps, if any, could you suggest that somebody might start down that path to say, okay, you know what? I never really thought I'd like to be like Teddy Burriss, but you know what? I think I would. Where do you start that process?
Well, I like to start people. I just ask them questions, and I say, okay, tell me about the disc profile that you did, or the strengths finders, or whatever. What assessments have you done? How much of a grasp do you have on what your unique skill set, your unique talents are? And I think often people, they're unable to articulate them. Now, they probably could have back when they were 10 or 12 or whatever, but they kind of push them to the back. So I just encourage people to think about what is it that really, and I go back to this whole question, if time and money weren't a problem, what would you be doing?
Yeah.
So I think that's a starting point, is to get your arms around yourself. What are the drivers in your life? What things really drive you? What's your value system? What are the drivers in your life? And how can you convert that then to a plan for this third age? Yeah. There's this, we suffer going back to the whole Western culture, we suffer from living too short and dying too long. I alerted to that. When we have the option to live longer and die shorter, or I like to use the term die young as late as possible. But we don't move in that direction very well because we're so caught up in cultural expectations. Yeah. We think this is what we should be doing, when in fact it's probably counterproductive in a lot of ways. So,
interesting perspective, Teddy. If there are no questions, we'll move into kind of our
well,
summary.
I did have a question.
Yeah.
I think let me bring it back up about what's the makeup of let's say, he says, what's the percentage of people, Doug asked, percentage of people who are not wired to retire, and what's that character look like?
Well, I think the best way for me to answer that is to let's look, and we didn't really get too deep into the changing environment,
and we only have a few minutes left.
Let me answer it this way. Let's look at what the boomers are doing today. When you consider that the most number of businesses that are being started in this country are being started by people over 50, by far, several times more than that age group where you think that would be happening. So the boomers are saying, hey, I'm not going to the park bench. I don't want to be like grandma and grandpa. I'm not done yet. I've got skill sets that I want to carry forward. Well, I'm either going to go out and help people by volunteering. If I've got the money to do that, I'll volunteer. Or if I don't, or I'm motivated by starting a business or running something, I'll go out and I'll start a business. And that's what we're seeing. That's how retirement is being redefined. We're reconsidering that this off the cliff vocation to vacation just doesn't make sense. I'm going to do more with the 30 to 50 years that I have laying in front of me. And I'm going to do it as long as I can. I want to keep my health as good as I can for as long as I can. And I want to go out and change the world and help people. So that's more the mindset that we're seeing, and the boomers are driving that. So I hope that answers the question. And that's what I get excited about, is talking to people.
And I did
interested in doing that.
I did some research with a franchise broker not too long ago, and the average age of a new franchisee is in the 50 to 55 space. Mm-hmm. The average age of a new franchisee, and that's starting a new business. Yeah.
Well, in that age group, that's where you get, let's not forget that
they had the
75% of the wealth in this country is people over 50.
Yeah.
So we have Gary Foster's our guest today, talking about redefining retirement and the third age. We've got about 10 minutes left, and if you could spend 3 or 4 minutes sharing some takeaways you'd like our folks to have. We had covered a lot of turf today. So what are some things you'd like us to go home and implement?
Oh boy, where to
Ready,
start?
set, go.
Ready, set, go. I just really, and a lot of this is coming from personal experience. I just encourage people to think about what is it about yourself that is unique, and you are unique. Okay, you have a unique talent, skills, whatever. What is it about you that perhaps you let go dormant? I mean, I think about all the wasted resources that we have in this age group of third age. You people who've said, I'm going to the park bench, I'm done, been there, done that, I've earned the right to go do nothing. And then the next thing you know, you're doing this, right? When in fact, on your own timetable, on your own schedule, at your own pace, maybe you carry that talent and that skill forward and do something that not only lights your fire, but it also maybe going to change the world a little bit, or you're going to impact the life of one person, who in turn may impact the life of three more. So it's just, it's an exciting concept to think about the fact that there's this incredible reservoir of accumulated skills and talents and experiences that people could, rather than doing a landing, they could do another takeoff, okay? A takeoff of a different form that helps society. And that's I guess my big passion is saying, okay, folks, let's do more with what we've had, or what we have, or what we've accumulated. Let's leverage it forward. Let's start by protecting our health so we can be healthy and do this. And let's go out and let's make a ruckus. So I'd say I'm looking for retirement rebels. I'm looking for audacious agers, if you will. People who are bending the curve, if you will, back up away from the decline up to where it levels off, and having some impact. So I hope that came across as meaning something, but that's kind of, to me, that's the takeaway. You're not done yet.
Yeah,
Start over.
Live till you die. Is it live till you die, or what's that phrase?
What's the one? There's one that there's a quote that said something along the lines of, God gave me this body not to come to heaven all nice and clean and dirty. He wants me sliding in dust and dirt flying.
Yeah, kind of like a Pete Rose slide into second, right? That's the way you want to wrap it up.
Head first. So. Gary, thanks for joining us. Hang around for a few more minutes. We're going to each share, Teddy and I will, a story or so, and then we'll talk about our next week's special guest, which is kind of cool for me personally. Yeah. So I'll share a little more about that in some detail. Yeah. So I'll start, Teddy, if that's okay. We good? Okay.
Go ahead, your turn.
You guys mentioned about when the husband retires, again, back in the day, husband retires, the wife had been at home and she says, all right, tired of seeing you. I want to start something else. And I remember my grandparents, my mom's folks. My grandfather was a business owner, self-employed, owned a company, and was quite busy bringing in the money. And my grandmother traditionally raising the kids and the house and so forth. So anyway, so he retired, and he and another fellow put their money together, and the other fellow's wife. So my grandmother and this other lady got together and started an office supply store. This was back in the pre-Walmart, Sam's Club, big box, Home Depot, the home, well, that stuff. It was a strip mall, and they had an office supply store in there, and that gave her purpose. It gave her something to do. And Teddy, you and I were talking on Monday about things that we do that are purposeful and fulfilling.
Yeah.
And Gary, I really like what you shared about how what we do can impact other people in a positive way. I think that's very fulfilling for a lot of folks. I know a lot of my clients, when they reach that 50s and even to the 60s, they say, you know what, I don't have to be chasing the dollar. I need to feel something that's fulfilling, and whether it's volunteerism or it's working in an environment that allows me to contribute to other people in a positive way, that has an intrinsic value to me apart from the money. The nice thing with what Teddy and I do, I think, and hope you'd agree, is that we get paid to do that very thing. So that's really the best of both, is we get paid to impact lives.
Yeah.
And we love doing it, and hopefully we're good enough that they keep paying us, Teddy. So
Right, yeah.
I'll throw it back to you.
Oh, crap. She closed her door. She couldn't hear you say that. Yeah. Hey, here's the quote. Life's journey is not to arrive at the grave safely in a well-preserved body, but to rather skid in sideways, totally worn out, shouting, "Holy shit, what a ride." I remember the first time I saw that. It really rang true with me. And for me, retirement is a word I don't use. Because I think there's two types of retirement, Gary. There's retirement, and then there's retirement. You know, that's that whole nother level where really you go sit on a dock, or you go sit in a beach chair, or you go sit in a rocker. And for me, that's not something I ever want to do. I mean, I do have the wherewithal to come to nearly a complete stop here really soon if I wanted to, but that's not happening, because I'm going to wear this thing out, completely wear it out, doing things that I think are beneficial to others, and along the way having a freaking fantastic time. So yeah, when my wife and we got done raising daughters, my wife and I had always agreed that when we got done, I could go do whatever I wanted to do. For years, I wanted to be a dock boy. I was going to hang out at Smith Mountain Lake. I was going to work the docks, help people get their boats, put fuel in their boats, get the ice out, help them get their fish out. I won't gut their fish because I don't do that. But I was going to hang out at a dock, ride a bicycle back over to my little bungalow, and ride back the next morning and just hang out at a dock. Well, here's why that doesn't work for Teddy. And I would wager most of the people on here who know me know why that won't work for Teddy. I need people. I need lots of interaction every day. So I've got to find ways to keep interacting. And I think that all of us need to find ways to take whatever retirement looks like for us and do something that's meaningful and worthwhile for us. And it probably, for most of us, will not mean sitting on a dock. So that's my story.
30 years of bridge, bingo, and bocce ball didn't work.
Everybody's got something that they enjoy doing. And so you can enjoy for the pure enjoyment, like watching a movie or playing golf or whatever. And then there's the fulfillment part of it. Does it have meaning? So we can enjoy things. We can enjoy a nice meal out. We can enjoy a round of golf. We can like to watch movies. We could sit in the rocker, and we can enjoy those things. Are we deriving the value, and do we see the fulfillment and the purpose behind it? And so I think that they may not be mutually exclusive things, but I do think they're both important. So we have to enjoy and feel like what we do matters. So we're just about done. Teddy, I'm going to talk about next week's guest, but first I think
who, by the way, retired.
Yeah, he's retired and he's loving it. All right. And well, first off, it's Art Gibel, and Art is retired. He is my CEO, my former CEO with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina. He retired, I think, in January. So he'll be in, and he would tell us, and I'm sure he will. He said, "I highly recommend it." He loves retirement. I highly recommend it. You know, that was his thing. He is able to travel and see family, and obviously there's a lot of stress involved with his role, and so now his schedule is his own, and it's pretty full. He's really, really, really digging this whole retirement thing. So, but what he's going to talk about, and it's interesting because I get to interview my former CEO. So, and he allowed me to do that.
So it's going to be a fun show.
What he's going to talk about is, and this is for job hunters now, when you go on an interview and you're sitting there talking to your frontline supervisor, your immediate supervisor, the kinds of questions that they will ask you will differ from what a CEO will ask you. And so what I'm trying to get from Art is an understanding of a CEO president's perspective. What is it that they look for when they're interviewing candidates for mid to senior level positions? So the questions will be different. They're maybe looking for different qualities in people versus what a frontline supervisor might look for. And also, Art made a big change. He used to work at Sara Lee, so as a manufacturing, textiles, that kind of stuff, and then into nonprofit. How can a senior executive make an industry change? He'll talk about how that happened. That'll be next week. So Teddy, take us home.
Hey, Gary.
No, it's noon, by the way, noon Eastern time on Wednesday.
Yeah, this next Wednesday. Gary, thank you very, very much for showing up, man. A great conversation, lots of engagement. We really, truly appreciate you.
The pleasure has been mine. You guys are a lot of fun. I hope I brought some value.
Checks in the mail, right? Checks in the mail. We'll see.
Everybody have a great week. We'll see you next week.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Know.
Bye.